allows it to be used in rendezvous radar to track the gamma ray observatory just prior to the time of release.
Atlantis, Houston, just a heads up. Camera D is about 1 degree from over temping. You can leave it on. We'll give you a call when you need to turn it off.
Okay.
This live television from Atlantis showing the gamma ray observatory and the end effector, or the grapple fixture of the mechanical arm as it's connected to the observatory. In the background, Earth and Atlantis currently passing off the east coast of Asia, just below the southern tip of Japan. Atlantis now moving off the coast and over the Pacific Ocean. Again, we expect to lose live television from Atlantis in just a couple of minutes.
Jerry, we're 7.5 minutes away from deploying.
That communication was from pilot Ken Cameron, who is in the aft flight deck of Atlantis and has been there as the intravehicular crew member or in-cabin control member for the EVA astronauts. And he was communicating there with mission specialists Jerry Ross and Jay Apt, who are awaiting the event in the airlock of Atlantis. Flight Director Chuck Shaw is now polling controllers for a go for release of the Gamma Ray Observatory.
Atlantis, Houston, your go for release.
Copy, Marcia. Go for release. We're ready. Okay, Houston, we're going to take your KU in about 10 seconds.
Copy. We're 5 away from release, guys. That's it. If you can avoid breaking box, that'll help us a lot. If we're going to what? Good PPT.
This is Mission Control Houston. A countdown clock here in the control center, counting down to release the Gamma Ray Observatory. Now shows 2 minutes to go to that event. On board Atlantis, Mission Specialist Linda Godwin will perform the actions that will release the observatory from the mechanical arm. At that time, Atlantis will be almost midway over the Pacific Ocean, midway between Japan and Hawaii, at an altitude of approximately 243 nautical miles.
1 minute 30 to release.
Guidance, Navigation, and Control Officer here confirms that Atlantis has now been put into a free drift mode. The reaction control system has been essentially shut off to avoid any disturbances as the Gamma Ray Observatory is released. Houston, grows release. Houston, you are go for reaction wheel control.
We copy that.
And the Payload Deploy and Retrieval Systems Officer here in the control center confirms that the Gamma Ray Observatory has now been released, and Atlantis is performing its first set burn, backing off from the observatory at about 1/2 feet per second. That go from the crew for reaction wheel control was for payload operations controllers to begin spinning up reaction wheels on the Gamma Ray Observatory. There are 4 reaction wheels on the observatory that spin at opposite directions to one another to provide stability for that observatory. Atlantis is scheduled to perform a second separation burn, moving the spacecraft out of plane from the observatory. In other words, on a lateral direction away from the ground track of the Gamma Ray Observatory. And that burn is scheduled in about 20 minutes. Rendezvous officer here in the control center reports that according to rendezvous radar, range between Atlantis and the Gamma Ray Observatory is now 155 feet, and that's indicative of a good separation burn.
By the way, Jay and Jerry, we had a good step one, and we are over 200 feet away from grow now.
Okay, roger that. And let us know when we should start the repress cue card. We've got the thermal cover closed.
Roger.
Atlantis, Houston, Jay and Jerry, you did a fantastic job. It's time to come in and, as Jerry said before, wash up for dinner. You have a go to repress the airlock. Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, well, put that in work, Marcia.
And Jay and Jerry, I'm going to keep Ken up here with me to work SEP 2 and SEP 3, and they'll be down to help you after that.
Okay, we'll just hang on here. Yeah, we'll wait on the cue card because that needs comms.
According to information from the onboard radar, Atlantis is now 300 feet away from the Gamma Ray Observatory. payloads officer here reports that the reaction wheels for the Gamma Ray Observatory are working and performing excellently. Payload controllers at the Goddard Space Flight Center report that the Gamma Ray Observatory is very stable, with the wheels working very well.
Houston, Atlantis.
Go ahead.
If you want to stay with us, we're on page 6-13 at the top, waiting for T-minus 30 seconds for SEP 2.
Okay.
Payloads controllers also reporting that they have good sun reference pointing with the Gamma Ray Observatory. In other words, the Gamma Ray Observatory has a good lock on the sun, enabling it to keep its solar rays pointed at the sun. Atlantis is continuing to ease away from the Gamma Ray Observatory, now at a range of about 480 feet from the observatory, and about 9.5 minutes away from a second separation burn, which will be an out-of-plane burn, moving Atlantis away from the path of the Gamma Ray Observatory on a lateral motion without a change in altitude.
Jay and Jerry, the GROW is 500 feet out, opening at 0.95 feet a second.
Okay, roger that. Is there a period between SEP 2 and SEP 3 that we could have a con for a few minutes?
Okay, you're right. SEP 2 is 8.5 minutes away.
Okay, we'll hold the repress until after that.
The problem is, Steve, we're going to create all kinds of alarms and everything else when we do the repress. We don't want to bother you guys.
Okay, Jerry, there's 15 minutes in between SEP 2 and 3.
Okay, we'll start working the cue card on your call.
Okay, we'll give you a call.
Atlantis Houston. Grow is in a good sun reference attitude. The reaction wheels are working fine, and everybody down here is smiling. Good job.
So are we.
I bet
I
not
wanted
much
just
of those.
number 5, not just 3 over again.
We were talking about that.
This Mission Control Center graphic, the mechanical arm of Atlantis is depicted and tracks the movements by Mission Specialist Linda Godwin as she moves that arm back toward its cradled position and latched on the side of the payload bay.
And Jerry and Jay, we're about 4 minutes from this burn. It's going to be just a little bit of plus X and a couple feet a second in the minus Y direction.
Okay, thanks.
This is Mission Control Houston. We're now about 2.5 minutes away from the second separation burn to be performed by Atlantis. Distance between Atlantis and the Gamma Ray Observatory now about 1,000 feet. This second separation burn will result in a change in velocity for Atlantis of a total of about 2 feet per second and be performed with the reaction control system lasting approximately 7 seconds. This burn will be performed out of plane. In other words, it'll perform no change in altitude for Atlantis will result from the burn. However, Atlantis will move off of the ground track that it was previously on, make a lateral motion, and off of the ground track that the Gamma Ray Observatory is presently on. Mission Specialists Jerry Ross and Jay Apt are standing by in Atlantis' airlock. Currently, the airlock outer hatch is still open, and the airlock has not been pressurized. They'll begin that procedure following this next separation burn, coming up in about 1 minute.
Seconds to SEP2. Seconds.
Propulsion officer here reports that she sees the separation burn in progress. Good SEP2, Houston.
We see that. Residuals look good.
Okay, you ready, Steve?
Okay, we got 15 minutes now.
Okay, we're going to go to Vox and start the air-to-lock repress. Okay, read the card, don't do it. Okay, outer hatch close and lock. And Ken, if you'll get a time when we start the repress, that'll be the end of the EVA.
Atlantis Houston, you have a go for step 2 of the closeout, page 7-2.
Complete. Okay, Jay.
Step 2 on 7-2. you confirm that's step 2 on 7-2?
That's affirmed.
Okay, Jay. Okay, next step is verify water off. Water off. Okay, those DNC covers up with the DNC, connect SCU. O2 valves are already on. Power, bus select, main A, we've done all that. Power to SCU, we did that. O2 actuators to press. Okay, O2 coming to press.
Mission Specialist Jerry Ross and Jay Apt are now preparing to repressurize the airlock.
Okay, I'm in press. Okay, comm mode to hardline.
Atlantis, after 2 separate engine firings to separate from the Gamma Ray Observatory, is now at a distance of about 1,790 feet from the Gamma Ray Observatory.
Atlantis, Houston, we'd like you to wait on changing the TIFLs till after step 3.
Environmental Control Systems Officer reports that the airlock is now repressurizing. With the airlock...
We copy and except for that, all of step 2 on grow closeout is complete.
Okay, Linda, copy that.
The airlock now repressurizing, it makes the approximate duration of the unplanned spacewalk by Ross and Apt at 4 hours 26 minutes. Airlock pressure currently at 3.2 pounds per square inch. Also at this time, Atlantis is just a little over 8 minutes away from a third and final engine firing to separate it from the Gamma Ray Observatory. This final engine firing will be a posigrade engine firing that will have the effect of putting Atlantis on a path that will...
Step 3 targets are loaded if you want to look at them.
Okay, we'll take a look. And Atlantis, they look good to us.
Roger.
This third separation burn will put Atlantis on a path that has it gradually drifting behind the Gamma Ray Observatory at a steady rate. Atlantis is expected to reach a point from 40 to 60 miles behind the Gamma Ray Observatory before, on ensuing days of the flight, the crew begins a series of engine firings to work with a rendezvous test, which will bring Atlantis back up to a point within 8 nautical miles of the Gamma Ray Observatory. This engine firing is planned to have a total change in velocity for Atlantis of about 3 feet per second and last about 11 seconds in duration. pressure in the airlock, where Mission Specialist Jerry Ross and Jay Apt are repressurizing, is now at 5.1 pounds per square inch.
Atlantis Houston, we'd like you to go back to primary jets, please.
Roger, primaries.
Atlantis Houston, we'd like to inhibit angles.
Say again, Houston.
Inhibit angles, please.
Roger.
Environmental Control System Officer here reports that the airlock repressurization on board Atlantis is now completed.
Not us.
We had 1 minute to set speed.
And flight controllers are temporarily out of communication with Atlantis as we hand over from the western to the eastern satellite. Propulsion officer here reports that the third separation burn is complete, and the flight dynamics officer reported that its resultant output looked good.
Continuous interference on air to ground.
Yeah, we copy that, and we saw a good separator.
According to onboard radar, Atlantis is currently 4,300 feet away from the Gamma Ray Observatory and separating from the observatory now at a rate of about 5.6 feet per second.
Houston, Atlantis.
And just to reiterate again, current radar on Atlantis shows the range between Atlantis and the Gamma Ray Observatory, 4,600 feet. Two spacecraft are separating at a rate of about 5.5 feet per second.
you.
This is Mission Control Houston here in the control center. Members of the planning shift, the overnight shift of flight controllers, have made their way into the control center and will shortly be relieving the Orbit 1 flight control team. The Orbit 1 flight control team has worked a double shift today. Flight Director Chuck Shaw asked the team when it became apparent that there were going to be problems during the deploy, and with deploy the high gain antenna, whether they would like to stay or be relieved, and the overwhelming response was that they would stay.
Houston, Atlantis.
Go ahead.
Yeah, back with you now. We had a very loud noise, continuous noise, for about the last 5 minutes from just before SEP 3 till now.
Okay, we think that noise started when we started the switch over to UHF COM. Do you know if the end of this noise is by any chance coincident with that step in the repress procedure?
I don't believe so, but I'll check.
Okay, it's that step in the post-EBA procedure. It's
okay,
9
we got 5 by now, and we had a good SEP 3.
Okay, copy that. Atlantis, Houston, we think that noise may be related to the UHF 9-2, step 23. Might want to do that a little earlier, see if that solves the problem. Atlantis, Houston, comm check. Atlantis, Houston, comm check.
Back with you now.
Whoa. Did you do something that made that noise go away?
No, the noise was still with us, Marsh. I got rid of it by untying air-to-ground 1 from air-to-air. So there must have been some configuration problem, but I'm not sure what it was.
Okay, you might on page 9-2 in the post-EVA look at the steps on number 23. We think that the noise started when we got this place in the EVA prep. We think you did step 24, and that may have been what caused it when we did the original step.
Okay, stand by. We'll look at it. And Houston, Atlantis.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Marcia, I'll chase that call problem later. It's gone now, and I need to get back on the revised timeline.
Okay.
This is Mission Control Houston on the revised flight plan for today. As figured out post spacewalk and post release of the Gamma Ray Observatory. The crew will be going to sleep in about an hour and a half. That's about an hour and a half later than normal. Normally they would be going to sleep right about now. The crew will have spent about a 17-and-a-half-hour day at work today. As well as the Orbit 1 flight control team that's spent about a 14-and-a-half-hour period on console.
Atlantis, Houston, to get a little ahead on the timeline, we see stars 24 and 46 in the table, and you can use those. You have a go to torque.
Okay, thank you, Marcia.
Atlantis, Houston, on the DAP, you have a go for A1, B1.
Thanks, Marcia, for the reminder, and I'm ready for 10-2 maintenance also.
Okay, per the procedure, you have a go. Atlantis, we're 1 minute from an LOS. We're back at 9:34.
Okay, copy that. We're about to bump up the cabin pressure with O2.
Okay. Atlantis, Houston, we're back with you. AOS, forgot to tell you, we went LOS.
Oh, I think I knew that. And Marcia, when we did the 10-2 maintenance, I shut off the O2 flow at about 2.76 or 77, but it overshot quite a bit, and you'll see the DPO2 message.
Yeah, we saw that. Thanks. And if y'all are gathered around, I have a few messages for you. When you're ready, I'll read them to you.
Okay, are these of the type I need to write down?
Negative.
Okay, stand by. And Houston, Atlantis, we're all on the flight deck.
Okay. The first message is from Dr. Leonard Fisk. It reads, thanks for a really great job by the GROW project team members on board Atlantis and the GROW project team on the ground. It's a great beginning for the second observatory. Next message comes from the administrator through Brewster. Passed to the crew, congratulations for a job well done, and he's very proud of the crew's performance. Next one is from Mom. Says, Mom is grinning so hard his ears are locked behind his head. Thanks for the great work. And the last message is from the EDFE team. It's handwritten. I'll try to read it. It says, we are extremely pleased with today's EDFE testing. You look like a couple of chumps. Oh, no, that's champs. Looking forward to for more fun tomorrow.
I don't believe you have TV down, do you?
We got TV, and you are absolutely right.
Okay. Well, it was a hard day for you folks, I know, and it was a hard day for us too, but I'm sure glad that we had all the GISs that we performed, and this was like another GIS to us, and I think that speaks very well for the training we had. It was superb, and that's why you folks and us folks up here were able to pull this off, so thanks a lot for your help.
And we want to thank you. This is a great example of what teamwork really means. You did a great job today. We'll see you tomorrow.
Well, you kept us out of the woods quite a few times, and we appreciate that. So it was a good day overall. Thanks a lot.
Okay, sleep well. I'll give you to Bob.
Okay, good night. Thanks a lot, Marcia.
This is Mission Control Houston at a mission elapsed time of 2 days, 9 hours, and 39 minutes. The next television event will be a change of shift briefing with off-going Flight Director Chuck Shaw from the Orbit 1 team. He will be accompanied with Tom Lavigna, who is the GROW Deputy Project Manager at Goddard. It's Goddard Space Flight Center. Again, the next television event will be a change of shift briefing at 7:15 p.m. Central Daylight Time with off-going Orbit 1 Flight Director Chuck Shaw. This is Mission Control, Houston. This is Mission Control, Houston, at a mission elapsed time of 2 days, 9 minutes, and 42, 9 hours and 42 minutes. Orbit 1 flight controllers are slowly leaving Mission Control Center after a very long shift. Planning shift commentators, planning shift flight controllers have entered the room and are settling down to what promises to be a challenging planning shift. As flight controllers revise activities and timelines for tomorrow's activities.
Atlantis, Houston.
Go ahead, Houston.
Yeah, we'd like to bump up the cabin press a little bit for pre-sleep. We'd like you to go to 10.4 with nitrogen on page 6-7 in the 10.2 cabin press meter.
Roger, Bob. The comm is almost unreadable. I understand. Bump up the cabin with nitrogen to 10.4.
That's good readback, Steve.
Gotcha, thank you.
Atlantis, Houston.
Go ahead.
Yeah, when you get a chance, we'd like to do the EMU battery charge on page 9-3 in the EVA checklist.
Okay, Houston, we're already starting battery recharge. But we can't get EMU1 to take a charge. We suspect it may be the little plunger mechanism inside the suit. We've tried both SCUs with same result. Plan is to use EMU3's battery and top it off first thing in the morning with SCU2. You copy?
We copy, stand by.
And Houston, we're about ready to get into the water recharge.
Roger, you go for water recharge. Stand by on the battery charging.
Okay, Bob, and we're continuing to charge EMU2 off of the SCU2. So we don't have to have any words from you right away on that, and we're getting into the water recharge.
Okay, Jay.
This is Mission Control Houston. The change of shift briefing with outgoing Orbit 1 Flight Director Chuck Shaw has been delayed just a few minutes to 7:25 p.m. Central Time. That's the start time for the change of shift briefing at 7:25 p.m. Central Daylight Time. This is Mission Control.
Houston, Atlantis, we're getting ready to turn the FES off for the EMU maintenance recharge.
Copy that, Steve.
recharge started now.
Copy that, Jay.
Houston, Atlantis for the EVA folks.
We're listening, Atlantis. Go ahead.
Okay, it looks like tank C quantity has stopped decreasing. I think we've recharged the tanks. Do they concur?
Stand by. Atlantis, Houston for Jerry. We'd like to get a water pressure reading off the suit. And for EMU 1, you can do that for the procedure. For EMU 2, we need to come out of the battery charging mode to get that.
Okay, I think I copied that you concur that the water recharge is complete and that you have something you want us to do for EMU 1's battery charge.
Negative. We need the water pressure reading off the suit. For EMU 1, you can do it for the procedure. For EMU 2, you need to come out of battery charging and then get it.
Keep breaking up on comm. I think we must be just about ready to lose the signal.
Atlantis, Houston, comm is a function of attitude. As soon as we complete the maneuver, we'll come back to you in a couple minutes here and get the message up.
This is Mission Control Houston at a mission elapsed time of 2 days, 9 hours, and 58 minutes. The crew is currently about 31 minutes before its beginning sleep period. That's about an hour and a half later than had been pre-planned. The postponement of that sleep period was due to today's activities with the Gamma Ray Observatory deploy. Crew wake-up will be at an MET time of 2 days, 18 hours, and 30 minutes, giving the crew about 8 hours sleep. Crew members currently are in the airlock recharging the extravehicular mobility units, or the spacesuits. Crew members are recharging batteries on those suits. The propulsion officer earlier reported that the consumable status on board Atlantis is fine. We used a little extra fuel during the troubleshooting, but he reported there is no problem with that. Planning shift flight controllers do expect a heavy planning shift, and we'll be looking at a fair amount of rescheduling. They will be looking at scheduling a supply and wastewater dump for tomorrow's activities, as well as rescheduling one of the payloads called rescheduling the shuttle amateur radio experiment, also known, correction, rescheduling Share 2 activities.
We're ready to give you a fuel cell purge.
This is Mission Control.
Atlantis, Houston, we're standby for the purge. Your go.
for the purge?
That's affirmative. Go for the purge. How are you reading me, Steve?
And Bob, let's try one more time on EMU-1. We are verifying right now that the water charge is down. We're about ready to do the short dump on them. We do get power to EMU-1 from SCU-1. We just can't seem to get any charge to the battery.
Good afternoon and welcome to or good evening rather, and welcome to a press conference with Off-Going Mission Control Flight Director Chuck Shaw, seated immediately to my right, and then to his right is the Gamma Ray Observatory Deputy Project Manager Tom Lavinia from the Goddard Space Flight Center. We'll let Mr. Shaw open up with a few comments, and then Mr. Lavinia will have a few comments, and then we'll take questions. Chuck?
Okay, thanks, James. It's been a pretty good day for my flight control team, myself, the crew, and the agency as a whole. I guess I don't need to tell you, we've got the second of the great observatories in orbit now, and we're real proud of that. Things went well today. We got challenged a little bit, but it wasn't a challenge that we hadn't even practiced almost that exact scenario. I think the thing that I'm most proud of is I think you saw today the value of manned spaceflight. We did a lot of work from the ground, and we needed the folks as part of our team that were on the scene to finish up the job. So that point I want to make real clear to everybody, and I hope that everybody else is as proud of that as I am, that the value of manned spaceflight was shown today, and it was shown to be very effective. With that, I'll go ahead and, by the way, I don't normally sound like a frog. I have a cold. I did not come from yelling at my flight control team. They worked like a well-oiled machine, and I'm real proud of them. And my voice held up all the way. I've had about 100 throat lozenges that I got from everybody on my flight control team, so they supported me with that too. The release happened during Rev 37. It was about 3 revs late, later than the Rev 34 deploy that we had normally planned for. We are currently separating from the observatory at about 6 miles per rev. We'll continue that tonight and tomorrow. And at the end of the activities tomorrow, we'll start phasing back in for some Flight Day 5 activities where we'll plan to do a rendezvous DTO and practice some activities that we plan to execute on STS 39. As far as the deploy operations themselves, we had a perfectly nominal day up through solar array deploy. Both arrays were deployed. The POC at the Goddard Space Flight Center had no problems whatsoever. When we went to unlatch the high gain antenna, we found out it went through the unlatch sequence pretty much, and I'm going to let Tom describe what the folks involved with the observatory did. It wouldn't deploy, and that's where we started contingency plans. And Tom, why don't you take it from there and describe the contingency plans and what the folks at Goddard did.
Okay. The high gain deployment unlatch appeared to go well. We had micro switch indications that we had gotten a good unlatch. When we then proceeded to do the deploy of the high gain, we got no response from the initial deployment procedure. We watched the action, saw no movement, and in about 6 minutes we realized that we probably had a problem. We continued with the deployment. It should time out in about 21 minutes, and of course in 21 minutes we saw no action. We then went to our contingency plans. We have a fairly well-structured contingency set of contingency plans for solar array deployment anomalies or high gain deployment anomalies. And we went through those plans, we looked at the situation that we had, and we actually tried 6 options, and I'll describe a few of them for you, and a couple of them involve the shuttle, and I'll let then Chuck take over and tell you about those options. We tried an alternate motor drive electronics on the basis that maybe the primary was not working. That did not work successfully for us. We tried reversing the drive on the basis that maybe there was a polarity error, and that of course was not successful. We tried to increase the stepper rate. We could get additional torque by increasing, by changing the stepper rate. We tried that, and of course that was not successful. There were 3 other attempts that involved the orbiter, and before I turn it back to Chuck to cover those, we did try another approach, which was to actually move the gimbal on the high gain antenna with the idea in mind that there might be a lockup that we could free. We did move the gimbal of the high gain antenna, and that was not successful. We tried deployment in the normal mode after that, and that was then not successful. Now, in parallel, before I turn it back to Chuck, in parallel, we proceeded to do some EVA contingency planning, and we were building on some work we had done for GIS 3, in which we encountered in this long simulation a situation in which we had to plan for an EVA situation with an array, a simulated array that was stuck. And so we had the basis for the planning that we would do there, and we followed through and put that plan in place. We worked it with the EVA support people, and that was then provided up to the crew. And with that, let me turn it back to Chuck, and then I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about how we operated to implement that from our customer perspective.
One of the things that the GROW team and our team both had talked about long before the flight was to be able to use the orbiter with the GROW out on the end of the arm, and you use the orbiter's primary RCS jets, the big jets, and we'd rock the orbiter back and forth while they were commanding the appendage, whether it's a solar array or the high gain antenna, to move. We did that. We had coordinated that with the crew. This was something we'd practiced even in a sim, like Tom was saying. That didn't work during roll. That maneuver was optimized, the roll maneuver was optimized for solar arrays, so we went back and said, well, let's try a pitch maneuver since the high gain antenna actually comes out and flips up a little bit. We tried the pitch maneuver. That didn't help either. We thought that maybe we could take the RMS and move the GROW back and forth while we were doing that. So we did that too. And we found out that the GROW and the high gain antenna were moving as a unit, and whatever was keeping it from moving did in fact have the high gain antenna mechanically stuck, it looked like. And at that point we coordinated on some updates to the EVA activities that Tom has been talking about, that took advantage of the fact we'd gotten a little smarter on the telemetry that they had seen during the unlatching and deployment attempts. We coordinated that activity, started the EVA prep activity with the crew to put them in the airlock and depress the airlock, while we were in parallel doing some additional command troubleshooting from the Goddard Space Flight Center. We got our final coordinated game plan up to the crew and gave them a go for EVA. Tom, did you want to add anything more before we talk about what happened during the EVA?
Yeah, I'd like to say that at this point in time then, normally our POC, our control center at Goddard, is in control with regard to operating the observatory. But we had purposely wanted to be sure we could be effective in the event that an EVA was required. So we had a key team at the customer service room, or support room, that had the EVA expertise, and with that team and working with the EVA support people at JSC, we worked out the contingency plans, which then we basically followed through. As a matter of fact, the very first item that we had on that plan was for one of the EVA crew to go out and impart a push-pull movement to the boom in order to see if he could free it up. And of course, that did free it up, and those of you who may have seen it saw about a 20-degree movement of the boom, and that came from stored energy that was basically there. And if we were able to deploy normally, you would have seen a jump out as the boom was deployed. Let me turn it back to Chuck, and then I'll pick up again in a few things.
The procedure we had the crew do was we sent Jerry out on the starboard longeron. He translated back to the observatory, climbed aboard. The observatory was a very well-designed vehicle as far as accommodating EVA activities. It's got a lot of PFR sockets, the portable foot restraint sockets, for being able to place a man on board the observatory to be able to work from. It also has a lot of handholds. We used those handholds tonight, or this afternoon, I guess. Today, I've kind of lost track of what the time was. Sometime in the last 15 hours we used it. To have Jerry climb aboard the observatory. He stayed tethered to the orbiter at all times, of course. He reached across, and we were trying to describe the motion that he imparted to it. It was kind of a jiggle. He wiggled the boom a little bit, and it came dislodged. And you got this exact motion that Tom described. When we send the crew out, EVA, we turn off the RF system on board the GROW to avoid radiation hazards to the crew. With the RF system off, of course, and the umbilicals, of course, were released long before that, the crew had no means, the POC had no means of further commanding or getting telemetry from the GROW. So once we started an EVA process like that, we continue the EVA deployment, since it's a very straightforward activity, because the payload is designed to have its appendages deployed and stowed via EVA. So we turned around, and as soon as we got it loose, we told the guys to press on with a nominal EVA deploy of the high gain boom. They did. They went around the other side on the port side, reached the actuator mechanism for the high gain antenna, and cranked on the bolts that were there to operate the actuator mechanism. They'd practiced that many times in the wet F, so once that thing came loose, we felt a big sigh of relief, and we felt like we were home free as far as getting the high gain out, and in fact we were. The crew got the high gain antenna deployed straightforwardly and got it locked. We had the crew dismount from the observatory and move forward in the bay back into the area where they were away from the RF hazards, since the antennas were all aimed aft. And at that point in time, we could give the POC a go to power up the observatory, which they did. Of course, they had to turn the RF system back on when they did that, but the crew is all nice and safe up in the forward end of the bay. At that time, we had two activities going on. I did not want to bring the crew inside in our pre-rehearsed timelines for dealing with contingencies like this. We had talked about this and decided to keep the crew outside. And the reason for that is, if you had some subsequent failure, we've already got the crew at vacuum. We don't have to use the consumables to depress and repress the airlock anymore. So we kept the crew at vacuum. We also could get a leg up on the planned EVA activities that we've got planned for tomorrow. So we had the crew in parallel with the POC finishing up their commanding and getting the observatory ready to be deployed. We had the crew start some of the EDFE activities. They did handrail evaluations up and down the rail. We did clip activities, the crew load instrumented pallet. We got one set of those activities done, and we did the rope reel translation activities, which was an optional task that if we had time tomorrow we'd do. We got it ahead of the game today. And I'll talk a little bit more after we get through with the deploy on what we've got planned for the EVA for tomorrow. But we got a leg up on that. In parallel, the POC got their activities completed. Do you have anything more you want to talk about on the activities you guys did while we were doing the EVA stuff? One more thing. We were looking at whether we wanted to go out on Rev 36 or 37, and there was a lot of discussion on that. The activities from the POC standpoint and from our standpoint, we think we could have made a Rev 36 deploy. We talked about that. We had to work real hard at doing it. But we felt like we probably could have accomplished it. We caucused on the Prime Ops Loop, the GROW Project folks and myself, and my flight control team, we elected to not push our luck. We've had a real busy day, and in something like this where you'd had problems, the right idea is to stop, make sure that you haven't dropped any pieces, nothing slipped through the crack, double check what we were doing, take our time, because we had plenty of time to do it. So we took an extra rev just to make sure that everything was squared away. During that extra rev, we also took advantage of being able to get just a few more of the EVA activities done. So from that standpoint, I was real comfortable with it. It was a scenario we had practiced and gone through, and we had no problems whatsoever executing the rest of the activities. Tom, you want to talk about what you guys did during that time period?
Yeah, let me go back though a minute. I want to re-emphasize that the GROW appendages were designed for EVA deployment. So while we obviously wanted to successfully deploy them by way of the spacecraft systems, we knew that the EVA deployment should be a viable alternative if we had to get to that point. So while we were concerned, we had felt with all of the experience we had with the crew in having deployed the high gain and the solar arrays and the wet ifs that we had full confidence that we would be successful. We did not think that the boom lockup was a hard lockup. And as a matter of fact, we have taken a lot of video. We spent probably 15, 20 minutes taking video of the boom and of the cradle that it sits in. In the stowed configuration, the boom sits inside a U-channel cradle. And so we looked at the boom up and down, and especially the area where it sits in the cradle, and we've looked at the cradle. And so I think we've gotten sufficient data to really go back and analyze what we have and see if we can determine what the problem is. There's a supposition that possibly some thermal insulation may have torn and caused a latch up in the area of the channel, such as it was not easily freeable by the normal motor drive deployment. And so what I want to emphasize is the EVA actions were something that we had confidence in, and it was just a matter of going through our structured approach to see if any of the contingencies that we had defined from the spacecraft point of view would work in solving the problem, and of course it didn't, and we ended up going into EVA. I'd like to say the joint integrated simulations, which we did, and we participated in actually 4 dedicated to GROW, I think helped us greatly in being prepared. Our team at the CSR had trained fairly well in how we would operate in the event of an EVA. We transferred that responsibility to the CSR, and we really worked hand in glove with the JSC EVA people, and I think that proved to be very important in helping us succeed as we did.
I echo Tom's sentiment that we had a lot of confidence that the EVA would work, but I got to tell you, it sure felt good when that boom started moving. It was a spontaneous round of applause in the control center, and I won't say there was a lot of tension, but we were relieved quite a bit when we didn't have to chase the problem any further. So we were real glad that went as well as it did. The clip activities, I think we got a lot of good data on that activity. As you know, that's an instrumented type activity, so we recorded it. And we got a lot of good video from that. The separation sequence from the spacecraft went absolutely perfectly normal. And as I said earlier, we're separating at about 6 miles a rev. And we'll continue to do that throughout the night and into tomorrow. I have got a preliminary game plan we put together so we could figure out where the crew is going to be going, about the activities that we're going to continue to do tomorrow. We plan to continue to do the EVA activities on Flight Day 4, the EDFE activities. We've been wrestling with, do we want to have a shorter crew day since we kept the crew up a little bit longer. It's about, I want to say, let's see, we were going to originally put the crew to bed tonight at 9 o'clock. We will end up putting them to bed about 10:30. So we'll get them up probably a little bit late tomorrow. Excuse me. But we plan on going out and doing about a 5.5 to 5 3/4 hour EVA tomorrow. the thing that keeps the EVA the length it is the track evaluations. You remember the CETA rail evaluations. You can't do the full 48-foot length track evals while the observatory is in the payload bay. Now that the observatory is in orbit and successfully deployed, we'll take the deployable track, just like we told you about a little bit earlier in an earlier press briefing. Deploy that and do the full length of evaluations. We plan to do all of those activities to take advantage of the fact the payload bay is empty. Then we'll go back and do the MFR activities. It takes both crew members to do the rail evaluations, so both crew members are going to be tied up for the first half of the EVA. Second half of the EVA, remember, we had parallel activities. One crew member was going to be in CLIP doing the activities that we started today. The other person is going to be on the MFR. We plan to continue to do that. The only difference is that we won't work the crew very hard because one of them will sit there and watch what's going on while the other one is in the MFR, and then vice versa. Excuse me. 1 second. This is only water for right now. Can't believe I said that at the press conference. Where was that? We will. Jerry was the one, I believe, in the clip today. So Jay will most likely do the activities tomorrow, and we'll probably timeshare a little bit of that. Jerry may, in fact, repeat some of the activities he did today because that was some of our optional tasks, to repeat some of the clip data takes. And we'll press on and do the activities as far as the limp mode tests, the rate evaluations, et cetera, that we've previously discovered. Our airlock depress currently, and don't hold me to this because the planning team's been handed this and said they're going to be working it overnight. We'll plan on doing an airlock depress about 0 hours MET. That's going to be roughly 9:15, 9:20 in the morning, Houston time. And we'll be outside for about 5.5, almost 6 hours. We'll be back in roughly at 6 hours MET, so 6 hours later. And we'll plan sleep to start at 9 hours MET tomorrow. 3 days, 9 hours MET. We'll plan on doing the EVA prep activities. The crew should wake up about 18 hours and 30 minutes MET. And right now it's about 10 hours and 23 minutes MET. And for those of you that are good at changing MET to Central Daylight Time, you can do the number crunching on that. I'm not good at that. I just hope I wake up in time to come back in the morning. Flight day 5, the rendezvous DTO activities, the radar's working perfectly. We used it to track the observatory as we separated from it. So we'll plan on doing those activities along with the RCS hot fire, the cabin stowage, etc. And we'll plan a nominal deorbit and back to Edwards on flight day 6. That's the current plan, is to go back to Edwards. And with that, I don't think I have anything else other than we're real proud of the crew. I don't think I can say it enough that we're proud of the crew's activities. They trained hard for this activity, and it showed. They were able to support anything and everything we did. The training activities at the POC, the Joint Integrated Sims that Tom was talking about, paid off in spades today. My team worked perfectly. And when I say my team, I include the GROW POC folks, the folks in the customer support room. It just showed that this is a very large, complex operation, and it showed the agency in manned space flight at its best. And I'm just very proud to be part of that. With that, I don't believe I have anything else, and we can open it up for questions.
Can I make
no, sure.
I think Tom's got something.
I'd like to give you a bit of information with regard to the observatory. We did release in standby mode, and then we quickly moved on to sun reference pointing mode, and that's the mode we'll stay in for a short period of time while we calibrate our systems, and everything is going well. So we're real pleased with the situation. And I'd like to also express the appreciation of the GROW project for the outstanding job done by the shuttle organization, of course, especially the flight crew in getting GROW on its mission. And the shuttle, of course, gave us a great ride on Friday, and that was really great to get off on the day we had planned. I'd like to also commend the shuttle flight operations and payload integration teams, and Chuck Shaw, the flight director. I think he did an outstanding job of pulling us all together and working as a team, and they were very professional in working with our project, and they've really contributed significantly to the success so far of the grow mission and its ability to go on.
Thank you.
Okay, then with that, we'll open up to questions. We'll start with questions from JSC, and then I understand we have some from other NASA centers, so we'll go there. Do we have any questions here?
I'm Irene Brown with Florida Today. I just wanted to know how the EVA differed from simulations that you did. There seemed to be some discussion at first about footholds or equipment or something to bring on,
Sure.
to bring out.
Believe it or not, the scenario where we had an appendage not deploy completely, we went through in the third joint integrated sim. So about, I guess about a third of the way through this activity, I sat there and mentally I'm thinking, this is a sim. I wonder how long we're going to run today. It felt just like the training activity. It was very realistic. Where it differed was that we wanted to have the crew go out and wiggle the boom. As I said earlier, the observatory has got sockets for all the portable foot restraints. If we had a latch not open, the crew had a very clean technique for going and operating the latches. We had seen the latches operate, at least most of the way operate. We suspected it could have been a latch hang-up. But our telemetry showed at the Grow POC and here that the latches had opened up enough that we thought they should be free. So the procedure changed a little bit, and that's what we were talking about when Tom said that we transferred control of the Grow activities down here to the customer support room, where we had the Grow EVA team, so they could interface face-to-face with our EVA team, and for this exact scenario where we were able to, where we had to think about what the real-time changes were. We decided we needed to have a crew mount on board the observatory using the built-in capabilities that were there and translate across and grab the boom and wiggle it. Now, if the boom had not come undone, we had a couple other tricks up our sleeve where we were going to go grab it in a different place and wiggle it, where we were going to, we had a pry bar that we were going to able to probe around with. We had a lot of different activities. So we weren't out of tricks. It just happened to be our first trick worked, and it worked real well. We had, for example, some of the discussions had a portable foot restraint installed over on the starboard side. That's what Jerry was going to initially use, and he elected that it was easier, instead of installing the portable foot restraint, just to climb on board and hold on the handrail, and that's what he did, so it was a lot cleaner activity. Jay, if that wiggling had not worked, Jay was prepared to install a portable foot restraint on the port side and operate either the latches or the boom deploy mechanism from the port side, while Jerry was over on the starboard side manually assisting if he needed to. It turns out we didn't need to do that. Those activities where one crew member was going to have to physically help the boom move weren't part of the nominal procedures, if you can call going out EVA to operate that nominal. But that's where the changes were.
Okay, any more questions here? Then, okay, Mark.
Mark Carreau with Houston Chronicle. And the ratcheting that took place, did both crew members do some of that, or was it Jerry Ross exclusively? Do you recall?
I don't recall who the primary operator was on that. I believe both of the crew members were involved. But
Yeah, it was Jerry who did the ratcheting, and he only needed to ratchet 180 degrees on the bolt that he was driving in order to get the full deployment. And one of the things we were concerned about, and we talked to the crew, was to be sure that was done very slowly, because there's a large 500-pound weight with the antenna on the end of that long arm, so you have to be really careful. And he did that, and of course he had practiced that very activity.
Well, actually, there were two bolts that we ended up operating. You heard us referring. My voice is not going to go out. There were two bolts. One was a red bolt, and the crew would back that out, and that would disconnect the mechanical linkage from the actuator mechanism where the actuator hooked to the boom. The crew backed that bolt out, and then they were free to turn the yellow bolt, right, to, and that's the bolt they turned 180 degrees to swing the boom up. And then they'd pull the over-center linkage, which locked the boom in place. So that was the activities that were done. Like I said, when we got to that part, that was stuff that the crew had practiced a large number of times in the wet F and had no problems with. It was very familiar turf.
Okay, Jim Asker.
Jim Asker with Aviation Week. Were you in the nominal altitude for the grow deploy? It seemed like I'd seen some figures where you wanted to be a little higher. So,
No, we had a perfectly nominal ascent, and we were in a perfectly nominal orbit. So, we were real pleased with that. The ascent worked perfectly.
Okay, now let's go to the Goddard Space Flight Center, where I understand we have questions. Go ahead with your questions, Goddard.
This is Joel Runas from WNYC and Computer Talk for Flight Director Shaw. Could you discuss the decision-making process and the pluses and minuses in your decision for your team to stay on for a double shift as opposed to handing over to the Orbit 2 team, which had planned to do some of these activities?
Sure. There were a couple of things that went into it. One of them is the practicalities of how many people you can train to do a specific bear with me, to do a specific activity. As you know, our team is made up of both folks that are orbiter systems related and also phase specialists, such as the procedures officer, the flight dynamics officer who's trained in calculating the separation techniques, our integrated communications officer who's very familiar with GROW's communication systems, of course the payload officer, the EVA officer, the flight activities officer. But we've got a large number of folks that are orbiter systems more focused instead of payloads focused, such as the ECOM, EAGLE, DPS officer. I polled the room. We looked at how long we would have to stay on. It was in the neighborhood of 14 hours, I believe, total time, 14, 15 hours, I can't recall how long we'd stay on. That's not an excessive length of time. It showed very good, the team spirit, when I went around the room and we decided on who would need to stay and who wouldn't. To a person, front rooms and back rooms said, "You've got to be kidding, we want to stay for the duration." We looked at the timeline for going out and doing the EVA activities, so we had a good idea of how long we wanted to stay on. There was no slam on the Orbit 2 team. It was just a question of we had gone through the deploy activities and these EVA activities a number of times. Milt Heflin, who's the Orbit 2 team flight director, and I had talked about it a number of times, and we both agreed that since his team had not had the luxury of going through the sims that paid off so handsomely for us during the flight, the wise idea was to have the teams that had been trained in those activities execute them. Normally, we would have had Milt's team come in later in the day to relieve us, even if it was only for about a 4 or 5 hour shift. As it turns out, because we slipped all the way to Rev 37, bringing them in for just a couple of hours just wasn't worth it. And all of us felt good, and even though I don't sound good, I feel good. And we elected to press on. We consulted the other team also, and they agreed. So we locked arms and marched forward, and you saw what we got accomplished. And we'll we brought the planning team in about an hour early to help us get off. Phil Engelhoff and his planning team are over there now reconstructing and adding to what we're going to be doing for tomorrow. And then my team will come back in tomorrow about an hour and a half late. So Phil's shift is a little bit longer today. It's about, I think it's about 10 and a half hours, maybe 11 overnight. We'll come back in the morning and pick up where we started and then hand over to Milt about halfway through the EVA.
Okay, and if that's all the questions from Goddard, we'll come back here to the Johnson Space Center for any wrap-up questions. And if nobody has one, then we'll wrap up the press conference now and go home and relax.
Sound like a plan.
Thank you.
This is Mission Control at a mission elapsed time of 2 days, 10 hours, and 35 minutes. The next television event will be a replay of the Flight Day 3 activities. That replay is expected to begin at about 8:15 p.m. Central Daylight Time and will last approximately 1 hour and 13 minutes. Repeating, that next television event is a replay of Flight Day 3 activities at 8:15 p.m. Central Daylight Time and will last approximately 1 hour and 13 minutes. The crew has begun their sleep period, although they are winding up some activities. Wake up is scheduled for a mission elapsed time of 2 days, 18 hours, and 30 minutes, or about 3:50 a.m. Central Daylight Time.
Go ahead, Atlantis.
Yeah, just one last question, Bob. I know you're going to be working on this all night, but is the basic game plan for tomorrow late wake up and a short EVA?
And Steve, we're going to try and get you a near full duration EVA. We are going to adjust the schedule to get you to sleep on time.
Okay, thank you.